Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies.
That's a completely different thing. It's a different thing that if the church wasn't arguing whether or not black people can become Christian or not because of the enslavement of black people, because how can you enslave a Christian, right? It's a completely different thing if, black people were not forced by force to worship lily white Jesus under the auspices and the tutelage and the supervision of the actual Catholic Church, which you happen to belong to. So it's one thing of talk. Talk is one thing. It's a completely different thing of the historical facts behind it. Why do we have residential schools in Canada? Why do we have a similar type of schooling system in Australia? Why do we have forced conversions happening in terms of Orientalism in West Africa and the Caribbean, all kind of stuff? Why did that happen? Because people just said something racist.
What you were talking the Pope that you're referring to was Pope Alexander VI, I believe, or Nicholas V, one of them. But I think it's Pope Alexander VI, the one that you're referring to, when he mentioned the word perpetual slavery in the thingy. I'm just interested because I'm trying to see how much knowledge you actually have about this. And that was a papal bull. That was a papal bull that was issued. There was also another papal bull issued because at that time Christendom was at war with Muslims, because Muslims they ruled over Spain and Portugal for 800 years, and they were pushing the Muslims out. So it was a consistent war with the Muslims that was going on, and because the Crusades was sanctioned by the Pope in 1090. That Pope, I think it was Nicholas V, he allowed Ferdinand and Elizabeth, the king and queens of Spain, to continue the war against the Saracens, which would have been the Muslims. But the one that you're talking about in terms of perpetual slavery, you're talking about the Alexander VI, that papal bull there. And I believe all these papal bulls were within the same century. And then there was another papal bull that nullified all those papal bulls and demanded that everything be returned to the people who were enslaved. And not just that they be returned to their land, but their property be returned to them. And I think that was Sublimos Dios and so on. And that was early 1500s. So I'm really interested in talking to you about this, because I need to see where is all this coming from. Because when I mention church teachings, when I'm talking about church teaching, I'm talking about things like the catechism. I'm talking about things like the canon law. I'm talking about things like, of course, encyclicals and papal bulls, but papal bulls can be cancelled also if it's determined by the next pope that there's something wrong in it that is not according to the faith, and it's not an infallible doctrine. So only infallible doctrines cannot be changed. But if something is passed and it's regarded as something that goes against the church, let's say later they come to that conclusion, then they can basically say this was wrong and admit to that, because all these papal bulls are still, you can read them all. It's not there. The Catholic Church is not hiding them. It's there. People can read it. This is why I'm so interested in talking to you about this, because I find it fascinating where this idea of the Catholic Church, and I want to know to what extent was the Catholic Church involved in this slavery against black people.
Yeah, I was talking about Pope Innocence. Okay, Pope Innocence the 8th. I don't know. Maybe of course there were other popes, right? This thing that you're talking about, I ain't got no clue what you're talking about. Okay, right? I can only talk about what I know. Right? I can only talk about what I researched. Right? And I can only talk about what's readily available, including what the Catholic Church, they themselves wrote about black people in their own writings. Okay,
what did they say?
That's all I can talk about. That is all I can talk about.
Can you give me
other than that, whatchamacallit, any black person that has reached the point that they can worship statues made out of clay or wood of a white person while calling that person God, I don't care what they say, it is an impossibility for that thing to be the truth. An impossibility. Whether you believe Jesus is God or not, right? Whether you believe Jesus is God, and as a matter of fact, as a black person, if you don't ask yourself questions, why am I worshiping this cracker? Why am I worshiping this lank-haired hippie, right? Calling this person God. If you can't even bring yourself to ask these type of questions, ain't nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with you.
Yeah, absolutely. If
something wrong with you.
If the black person, if they were worshiping, we don't worship, of course, statues, but if they were worshiping a black statue, would that be okay with you? Or
absolutely not. Absolutely not. But at least bare minimum, if you look at Indians, right? If you look at Hindus, at them, they have shirk with them. They have idol worshiping, but the idols that they worship look like them. If you look at the Orientals, the Buddhists that they worship look like them. If you look at white folks in Europe, the white baby lily white Jesus they worship looks like them. Here come these Negroes. Here come these Negroes, okay? Talking about, I think we're gonna worship lily white European Jesus. Are you kidding me right now? Is this some sort of a joke? What kind of argument you gonna give me to convince me to do that? Like, seriously, I'm more interested to hear that. Let's leave the history, the dirty gutter history of the Catholic Church alone. Let's put that to the side for a second, right? How are you going to convince me to worship clay images and wooden statues of European John Lennon white Jesus? How you going to get me to do that? That's what I'm more real interested in. Go ahead.
I would not get you to do that because we don't worship statues.
Catholics don't worship statues?
No.
I don't know what kind of Catholic church you went to or you go to.
No. Precious, I'll tell you. The Catholic Church, for example, if you're gonna make this accusation, you have to at least back it up with, let's say, because in the Catholic Church we have what are called terms and conditions, okay, and it's easy to prove the Catholic Church wrong. You just have to go to what they teach. And it's not like these Protestant churches where some guy studies for 5 years or 4 years and then he opens up a building and he starts talking about what he believes to be right according to the Bible, and then he starts preaching his own religion, and then it breaks up after about 2 months. The Catholic Church is not like that. The Catholic Church you can go to the catechism, you can go to the canon law, you can go to the papal bulls, you can go to the encyclicals, you can go to all of these things, and it officially tells you what the Catholic Church believes in, whether it believes in worshiping statues or not believing in worshiping statues. So
I have never in my entire life been to a Catholic school or a Catholic church except lily white Jesus is all over the place. Okay, when I went to Catholic schools, a chapel, guess what they had? Lily white Jesus. When I went to church and went 12 Stations of the Cross, guess what? Each station had on the 12 Stations of the Cross, whether in wood or whether in pictures or whether did it make a difference what Catholic church I went to? 12 Stations of the Cross, lily white Jesus. When I went to when I go to the Catholic schools, and on the doors of the Catholic schools, you have the crosses, right? And on the crosses, some metal statue of who? Lank-haired Jesus crucified on the cross. You can't tell me that Catholics don't worship. Like, this is crazy.
Paper gold. You see, black folks are chumps. If America were to tell you to bring all the rocks in this country to her, and she'll give you $1 million for it, you'll do it. And the next day she'll tell you we're using rocks for currencies, chump.